In the name of the Creator. This is the first proper stream. It feels like it. Let's keep it professional.
Let's keep it professional. We care a lot about the war, about the national disease. We care a lot about anything that is moving.
And this is what they announced before, just like it has been announced by Zelensky, by Mr. Budanov, Chief Intelligence Officer of Ukraine, and other officials. Saying that, I must say that on the night of July 6th, they started a major counteroffensive in Zaporizhia, trying to take advantage of some advantage, in their opinion, in the armor that was supplied to them by NATO. I mean, the systems of the fight management systems at night. So they believed that at night it would be much easier for them to overwhelm our ranks. And they failed. They lost a lot of armor. They lost a lot of personnel, but nevertheless, for more than a week, they tried to break the front line in Zaporizhia until today, but they failed even to break through even the first line of our defense. Along with that, they made some offensives in Donetsk, to the south from Donetsk, in Artyomovsk. Along with that, they were shelling Belgorod. Along with that, they started offensive in Kupiansk, shelling Belgorod. Along with that, they started nowhere. They managed to break our front lines. Yesterday, they had some tactical success. Nowhere in the area to the south from Donetsk, to the south from Velika Novoselka village, the so-called Vremyevsky part, and they decided to move their accent to attack to the west in the direction of the Azov Sea. In my opinion, according to them, according to their idea, the main idea actually is to get to the Azov Sea and thus cutting the on-land bridge between mainland Russia and Crimea, because they need a quick win. It's not a secret that, in essence, they are being instructed by the Americans. And they have to show something. They have to showcase some victory. As of yesterday and as of today, there are battles there in Vremyevo. To the south from Velika Novoselka, the main front line is between Markovo and Urozhaine. This is the name of the settlement, and in the western part of that area there are certain attacks, so the enemy tries to break through our lines. We had to give up some of the settlements, minor settlements there, but nevertheless we have a stronghold there, but the main defense line is far away from that line. So even if they break through the first and the second line of our defense in that area, they will have to break through the main defense line. As probably you could see, this is the so-called the dragon's teeth made of concrete and other fortifying systems. So I think that the mistakes that they have made are the following. First of all, they rely too heavily on the NATO-supplied armor. They believe that Leopards, German tanks, and American Bradley RFVs are more fire-resistant, but as you saw the footage, this is not true. It means that they could be destroyed by all means of anti-tank missiles that we have with no problems at all. So I do not see any advantages in those pieces of armor. And besides, they underestimated our strength. They believe that our soldiers would be scared and it would be an easy walk for them. But they failed over the last week. And this is my approximation, my personal counting, mine and of my team, who do some math. They lost all in all in the south, I mean Zaporizhia and Donetsk, and to the south from Donetsk they lost more than 100 pieces of armor, tanks, APCs and IFVs, let alone some other vehicles, cars, whatever. So the losses are quite heavy, but we have to understand that the enemy, I mean Ukraine, in that case, has a lot of reserves in terms of the armor, hardware and personnel. And we cannot say that the counteroffensive has stopped. So the counteroffensive is undergoing and it would go on for quite a while. And the main reserves, the main forces, the main offensive potential has not been exhausted yet. But we are prepared for that. Our intelligence and reconnaissance work very well. And again, the enemy defense line. That and the Western was launched, we destroyed the Ukrainian anti-aircraft systems, and the columns of armor were destroyed, and actually they didn't even manage to get deployed. They didn't expect that we will hit them so far away from the front line, but our reconnaissance worked very well, aviation, artillery worked very well, and our soldiers and the detachments, the special forces, detachment of Brigade 122 would destroy lots of tanks using anti-tank missiles. So this is a mundane combat work, so to say. And we have a lot of expectations, a lot of plans. We do hope that Ukraine would use fully its offensive potential in that counteroffensive, and we will destroy that. And after that, and again, I'm speaking in my personal capacity, after that, we will start our own counteroffensive, using the so-called the beaten track, as far as where they started their counteroffensive, they would do deep mining, and with their armor, they would, and with their personnel, they would demine some areas where we planted our mines, so it would be much easier for us to break through their front lines. That's it.
Well, thank you very much.
Большое спасибо, Даниил, за этот ваш ответ. Большое спасибо.
I think one of the interesting aspects of what's going on here is you speak of the Russian defenses and the prepared nature of these defenses. Just recently, the Russian Ministry of Defense highlighted the work of Colonel General Romanchuk, who is the commander of the Russian forces in the Zaporizhia area. Turns out that Colonel General Romanchuk used to be a senior instructor at the Russian Combined Arms Academy, where he wrote the book on Russian defense doctrine. And he helped design the defenses. Now he's in command of the defenses. What does this tell us about these Russian defenses? You know, when Russia first started digging these trenches and putting out the dragon's teeth and laying minefields, many people in the West made fun of it, mocked it, didn't understand the lines on the map that they were seeing. But today, as you have rightly pointed out, the Ukrainians haven't penetrated the first line of defense, let alone threatened the second line or the main line of defense. What does this tell us about General Romanchuk? And more importantly, what does this tell us about the mobilized soldier? You know, that was the other notion, that the 300,000 men that were more mobilized were unwilling to fight, poorly trained, unmotivated. And yet it appears that the exact opposite is the truth. The men that have been mobilized are fighting in the tradition of the defenders of Stalingrad, standing firm where they need to be, showing flexibility where they need to be, but more importantly, showing the kind of resolute character that one would expect of a Russian soldier defending their motherland.
First of all, we have to understand that any soldier, whether this is a contract soldier or immobilized or an enlisted man, a drafted one, after the first shelling, they would be used for that. After they survive the first battles, I mean, with close contact, they become very experienced, very seasoned soldiers. It only matters to survive through one or two combats, attacks, and after that, it would be an angry, motivated, and seasoned soldier to the extent it is possible. That's why we cannot say that mobilized are lacking resolution. So, if they were sent to the front line 2 weeks ago, there would be tragedy, but they actually were sent for that war in very much advance. These are seasoned warriors, so to say. For instance, in Vremyevo, which is to the south of Novosylki, there are lots of mobilized detachments and units. And why they gave up some territory and why the enemy managed to advance, that is because it would be up to 6 ammunition loads of MLRS, for instance. And one Grad MLRS system has about 21 rockets. And so one ammunition load is about 40 rockets. So, and they would stand up to 6 ammunition load full of MLRS. And that's why they had to retreat. And they had to withdraw, not because they were afraid of the battle, but the viewers have to understand. So in the trenches, and the trenches are made of earth, and the earth actually is being fortified with some wood, with some logs, 3 layers of log, for instance, and if you're lucky enough, that would be concrete or even iron concrete fortification. And when the shelling starts, and apart from MLRS, the enemy also uses ordinary guns and cannons, including 155mm caliber. So this earth and all those, the fortifying elements, I mean the logs, the concrete actually would be mixed, and the trenches become too shallow and can no longer be used in order to withstand the enemy's attack. This is something you have to bear in mind. No one speaks about that because this is a trifle, this is peanuts, but actually when you're in the trenches and your trench is no longer 180 centimeters deep, when it is half as shallow and you have to maneuver within those splinters, pieces of log and concrete, it means that the trenches can no longer be used as a protection. And the enemy starts its offensive in waves, continuous waves, and certainly our soldiers have to retreat to the trenches that were prepared in advance behind the first line. So, but that's a very important element of a warfare. In contact battles. So in essence, our soldiers would retreat a little bit, but no one flees. Only yesterday, the Ukrainian army started some advances, and all the Ukrainian media, including some of the Western media, started unanimously saying that the Russians are fleeing, so the front line is broken, but to the main front line, it is too far away. So we have to understand these nuances. I stated more than once that many viewers watching the military news and the footage from the war, just like a soccer game, just like, oh, he hit the bar or something like that, and there's being shown some arrows marked in blue, arrows marked in blue and red, but no one feels like being in the trenches. So if the viewers want to make anything out of that, let them imagine that they stay in these trenches being shelled all the time, 24/7, and what goes on then, how the conditions would change for performing your military duty when you have to fight efficiently, but in essence your trenches are no longer existent because of the shelling. As for the commanders in Zaporizhia and some other things, that could explain why we are so effective in standing the counteroffensive. I must say that a very concerted, operative, prompt coordination was arranged. Means that our infantry, our tanks, our special forces, our artillery, aviation, both the Army One and other pieces of aviation, they acted as one body. And certainly it was complemented by reconnaissance. So the decisions were taken very promptly. The reaction was very prompt once the situation on the battlefield changed. So this all worked. Let us not forget that the enemy was preparing for that counteroffensive for more than a month. It also analyzed its intel, and the enemy uses the reconnaissance and intel supplied by NATO, mainly by the United States. And some hackers already hacked the Delta system, for instance, that contained some documents, for instance, that were marked information provided by the partners. And these would be the American intel regarding the targets both on the territory of the special military operation and on the mainland Russia. And it's been published openly, so Ukrainians are studying these documents. They understand what units we have where, they get prepared. They try to overwhelm us in terms of numbers, to comply with all the rules of law so that their counteroffensive is efficient. So it doesn't mean that they would be probing for weakness blindly, but they realized absolutely where they're going to break through and what detachments they're being resisted by, but they failed. First of all, because of heroism of our soldiers, and secondly, because of this concerted action of all the types of our forces. This is my opinion.
Thank you for that. And as you said, the battle is still going. The Ukrainians still have strategic reserves that have yet to be committed.
Son of a bitch! Get off! Get over! Get off!
The future is something that we need to look at. I mean, right now it looks like the Russian lines are holding. That the technology and training and intelligence provided by NATO has not enabled the Ukrainians to achieve the strategic victory that they're looking for. Already, the Ukrainians are asking for new equipment. They're asking for F-16 fighters. Indeed, the Ukrainians have asked the Australians to provide them with F-18 fighters. Germany is promising more tanks. The United States is promising, the Abrams tanks. They're promising cluster munitions, maybe the ATACMS artillery system. Is this a never-ending conflict? Is this a war that will never end? Or is there a way that Russia can overcome all of um, the significant support provided by NATO to Ukraine, that Russia can overcome this and achieve a strategic victory of its own? And what would that look like? What would a strategic Russian victory look like? Does it mean the liberation of Donetsk, Kherson, Zaporizhia, Lugansk? Does it mean the liberation of Odessa, Dnipropetrovsk, Mykolaiv, Kharkov? What does strategic victory mean for Russia?
Let me start with your last question. This is again my opinion. I'm not in the position to speak on behalf of our military commanders, but the strategic victory of Russia in that conflict is when the Ukrainian state, I mean the state, the Kiev regime stops existing, is no longer existent, and when Ukraine is totally controlled by us. Because, for instance, even if we
29
take the territories along the left bank of the Dnieper, and there will be only the right bank part of Ukraine. So this territory would be used by the NATO countries as a springboard in order to attack Russia. So in that case, I think that we have to address that problem ultimately, to solve that problem ultimately, so that we do not leave this question to our children in 10 years. The whole territory of Russia should be totally controlled by us. And Ukraine should be ruled not by Nazi regime. I personally see that it would be just Ukraine returning back to its historical motherland, to Russia, being incorporated by Russia. Otherwise, we cannot resolve that conflict. Because the United States will not allow this conflict be settled peacefully. Even if there is a tiny piece of Ukraine, that would be a tiny piece used to launch missiles against us. This should never happen. As for the supplies of equipment, certainly, but for the Western supplies of equipment, Ukraine would no longer exist. Certainly, it helps them a lot. Their whole military potential is totally destroyed. The economy is totally derailed and destroyed. And the economy, well, actually, was being destroyed even prior to the special military operation by the corrupted functionaries, by the corrupted bureaucrats. So, certainly, NATO supplies help a lot, but according to the soldiers who had to fight against the NATO armor, they said that they are more scared by the modern Russian tanks, and unfortunately, Ukraine got some of these pieces in Kharkiv when we had to retreat very quickly. So some modern Russian tanks are more scary than the NATO ones, especially T-90 AM. Well, I don't think that we left lots of such tanks for Ukraine, so these are really very scary pieces of armor. But as for the NATO-made ones, there are some deficiencies in terms of the thickness of the armor. And Leopard, I'm not an expert in the material, but the experts say that Leopard is more comfortable, so to say. It is more efficient, meaning that it has more options in managing the fire. How do I put that? It's smarter. It's a smarter tank. Easier to run, but it lacks practicality, functionality, which has always been one of the priorities for the Russian-made ones. Ability to combat, strength, resistance, resilience. So the Russian tanks are much better. and the dynamic protection is much better. For instance, when Leopards were first supplied to Ukraine, we saw that actually they could put the Russian-made dynamic protection on the Leopard tanks. They didn't use the Western ones because the Russian protection systems are much better. As for F-16 are concerned, so let's wait and see. You have to prepare some infrastructure for F-16 in Ukraine. You have to train pilots first, and they have to be trained very seriously, so that F-16 do not start falling en masse during the very first battle, and that the stocks of the F-16 manufacturers plummet. Certainly. If there are some crews trained well to operate these jets, if these crews were trained, they, I think, would have already been supplied to Ukraine along with the jets. And also, Ukraine would need technicians to maintain F-16. And refueling systems are needed because the Soviet-style refueling systems are not compatible with F-16. More high-quality runoffs are needed so that you do not have to change your landing gear too often, so they would need a lot. Besides, we can strike F-16 deep on the territory of Ukraine. So it means that as soon as alarm starts off, they will have to take all the aircrafts off so that the jets are not being destroyed right on the airfields. There are lots of nuances why F-16 will create more problems for Ukrainians. The same is true for kind of fuel they are going to use for it. I'm not sure. And certainly, some believe that F-16, that's a fighter, and that means that F-16 is going to be used in the air battles. But now, F-16, I think, would actually be used in order to strike the land-based targets. For instance, F-16 certainly cannot fight against Su-57 because Su-57 actually can hit any targets at a longer distance rather than F-16. Actually, many judge about the air fight by video games, computer games. When you have some visual contact and you see the enemy, although the modern fighters may start a fight at a distance of 100-150 kilometers away from each other. I doubt very much that F-16 would change the game, would be a game changer. I think that F-16 would be a disadvantage in the sense that Ukraine will try to replenish its air force, getting as many aircrafts as they can, but I doubt very much how successfully Ukraine can use aircraft supplies. Once this counteroffensive fails, and I'm sure that it would fail, because we're not relaxed, we're not complacent, and this large-scale counteroffensive runs for the second week in a row, and they have not broken through our first line, but no one rests on laurels. We're working hard. We toil hard. We have lots of reserves that remain unused yet. And once we defeat them and the NATO-made equipment would be destroyed, and you will see a lot of footage of NATO armor on fire, then probably the Americans won't think twice whether they have to supply F-16 not to see footage of downed F-16s. So that's a big question mark. I don't regard F-16 as a game changer. Certainly, F-16 can use NATO-made missiles, air-to-land missiles, and they try to attach these NATO-made missiles to MiG-24, to Su, but that's it. But as for the NATO material, certainly NATO material helps Ukraine to sustain, and certainly they were helped very much by Javelin, by NLAW, and Stinger, for instance, manpads. So that was really very good for them. That was very efficient for them. And we are not happy about these supplies, any supplies. Even if the catapults are being supplied from medieval ages, from France, the very fact, well, actually, catapult can kill. And that's bad, that's no good. So certainly that's no good. But it won't be a game changer.
Thank you for that. I'd like to ask your opinion on a question that might have some political sensitivity. So if you can't answer it, I respect that fact. But I think the entire world was watching with great interest the Battle of Bakhmut, Artyomovsk, and the role played in that battle by Wagner, Wagner PMC. Wagner's been withdrawn from the front line to regroup, re-equip, but there's an ongoing Twitter war, so to speak, Telegram war between Yevgeny Prigozhin and the Russian Minister of Defense, Shoigu. If you could discuss a couple things. One, from your perspective, how important was Wagner to the victory in Bakhmut? And is there going to be a role for Wagner going forward? Is Wagner going to play a role in the continued fight against Ukraine? And what is going on between Prigozhin and Shoigu from your perspective? Is this serious? Is this a game that's being played to confuse the Ukrainians? Or does this spell trouble for Russia?
This is not the precursor of a trouble for Russia. And I cannot comment on that conflict between Prigozhin and Shoigu. This is not my position. And if we assume that this is some game in order to confuse the enemy, so certainly I cannot comment on that. How can I comment on that? And probably there is a conflict. And probably this conflict started from the times of Syrian battles. Always, male teams have some disputes. Whatever happens between them, whatever disputes and conflicts they have, I think that any moment it is needed, the private military company Wagner may re-emerge anywhere in Ukraine and would be totally unexpected by the Ukrainian forces and start exterminating them. The importance of the Bakhmut battle is not about the significance of that city. No, it is not so important militarily or strategically. Some Ukrainian leaders, when the battle for Bakhmut started, when PMC Wagner started its offensive in that direction, on that part of front, some would say that Bakhmut has some strategic significance, and if there is no Bakhmut, there will be no Ukraine. But in essence, what strategic meaning it may have, if our strategic significance is to, for instance, conquer Slavyansk or Konstantinovka, then probably yes. Bakhmut would be very significant for that. But if it is not our strategic goal, and I'm sure that this is not our strategic goal, our goals are much more large-scale and more strategic. And so this is not my insight, so this is my personal opinion. So Bakhmut never had any strategic significance. This is one of many settlements that we have to overtake. But what Wagner PMC did in Bakhmut, that's very important. The losses that Ukrainian forces suffered there is tremendous. And actually, you cannot even grasp these figures. I think it would be right if the Ukrainian forces withdraw from Bakhmut in late February. It would be a very right military decision because they would preserve their personnel, they would preserve the hardware, and they would make use of these people right now. But bear in mind that Bakhmut battle, that includes defeating Ukrainians in Solidar, and now one was intending to make a cauldron in Bakhmut when the Ukrainian forces were outflanked in Bakhmut. But it was not a full siege, it was not a cauldron. So this cauldron was left open so that the Ukrainians would supply reserves to that cauldron. And do you think that Zelensky actually did a lot for that sake? It was all of a sudden so important for him to maintain that media success, so exchange the lives of his soldiers for likes on the media. According to different estimates, they lost about 50,000 personnel, and they lost jets, they lost tanks, and also, for instance, our aircrafts were striking the areas next to Bakhmut, I mean Chasov Yar, etc. So the losses in Bakhmut were tremendous. And I do think that it also had to say on the failure that they have in terms of their today's counteroffensive. And as many say, that inexperienced mobilized soldiers were supplied to Bakhmut by Ukraine. Well, actually, this is not totally true. So the elite forces were there, and all the elite brigades were deployed there. And for instance, some elite brigades would be dispatched to that, it would suffer some losses, then it would be withdrawn, some another elite brigade would be dispatched, etc., etc. And the flanks were being defended by the special forces, special operations forces. So these like Green Berets, and these people just disappeared. They no longer existed. A lot of seasoned and experienced officers were killed there. The ones who were fighting for Ukraine starting from 2014. Some high-profile names we heard there, and another important thing that Wagner PMC did. It has become a horror, a nightmare for Ukrainian soldiers, just like memories of Bakhmut and the very mentioning of Wagner horrifies them. And many soldiers, Ukrainian soldiers, said on TV that they are eager to go anywhere but not to Bakhmut. Wagner, for them, has become a boogeyman, as you put that, in the United States. Something scary. And once Wagner reemerges anywhere in Ukraine, so it would demotivate immediately any Ukrainian detachment. The significance of Bakhmut cannot be overestimated. So that's very important, hugely in that sense. But in terms of the territory, so the whole settlement is not so significant.
Well, thank you for that. Look, we're about out of time, so I have one last question for you, and it's a little bit different in nature. But given the level of violence that is taking place, given the horrific casualties that are being suffered by the Ukrainians and the casualties being suffered by Russians, given the ongoing shelling of civilian areas in Donetsk, Lugansk, and elsewhere by the Ukrainian forces, there is a tremendous amount of bad blood that exists today between Ukraine and Russia. Someday this war will come to an end. You are from this area. There was a time when you lived peacefully with your Ukrainian neighbors. Do you ever envision a time where Russians and Ukrainians could live side by side in peace once this war comes to an end?
Well, look, not just I lived in a Ukrainian neighborhood, I was born in Ukraine, and until 2014 I lived in the city of Kyiv, so I'm from the very middle of Ukraine. When the war started on Donbas, I joined the ranks of Donbas militia, and I was defending the people of Donbas with the weapons. I knew what consequences would be entailed by the coup d'etat, and I understood very well why the army was sent to somehow bring to order Donbas in March 2014. Donbas certainly was not satisfied with the fact that the very first laws that was taken by the Ukrainian Kyiv regime that came to power by means of a coup d'etat, the very first laws were about banning the Russian language as the second official language. And the second law was about lifting ban on use of Nazi symbols. So these were the very first two laws that were immediately adopted. And certainly the Russian-speaking population was not just in southeast parts of Ukraine. So Russian-speaking people were living in the central part of Ukraine as well. So more than 70% of Ukrainians would be speaking and thinking in Russian. And they were banned from doing that immediately. And certainly I realized very well that this public protest that actually would be somehow addressed by means of force. And that's why Ukrainian Nazis were dispatched. The right sector, some Ukrainian nationalist organizations, Maidan, Self-Defense, and other Nazi troops were sent to different cities. And they called that the train of friendship. So the train of friendship is running to the cities of Donbas. So they used this term in order to scare the people. So in Kharkiv, they managed to suppress the mutiny. The same was done to Nikolaevsk, to Zaporizhia, using these skunks from Nazi organizations. They somehow broke up the lines of the demonstrators, but they failed to do that in Donbas. First, they would arrive to Donetsk. The Pravy sector or the right sector would arrive to Donetsk or to Luhansk, and they wanted to set their own rules, but in essence, they were beaten, literally beaten by local people. And then in March 2014, the regular army was dispatched, was sent to these cities. And the Western media says that everything started with Slavyansk, with Strelkov coming to Slavyansk. But this is not true. It is in March 2014, with no Slavyansk and Strelkov, that Ukrainian regular troops were sent to Donbas. And the troops were sent not to give flowers to the local people. This is how the war in Donbas started. So Donbas took a decision to fight. Other regions failed to do that, but we prevailed. So since then, it all lasts. The conflict is going on. What will be in future? Certainly, no one is going to kill anyone or to beat anyone up just because, I mean, after our victory. when we recover our territories. We'll not kill anyone for the people not supporting our ideology. But speaking about the war criminals, certainly they will be brought to justice. And other citizens, other residents, well, certainly not. Well, I do hope that I answered your question. Sorry for being so spontaneous.
No, first of all, it's a very emotional thing for you. It's a deeply personal issue for you. So don't apologize for being honest and open about such a thing. I appreciate your answer, not only for that question, but all these questions. It's been an invaluable session. And again, I want to thank the guest, Daniel Bessonov, a former minister in the Donetsk People's Republic. He's currently a war correspondent reporting on events in the Donbass. I hope you enjoyed this show. I hope you learned something from it. I think it very much was in keeping with the motto that applies here, that knowledge is power. So thank you for joining again, and I look forward to seeing you next week.
All right, everybody. I do believe we are live. I think they're both true, and that's why I'm saying, look, I've talked about the earthquake machines before. I wrote about them in well, more than one book. In a fictional context, in Faustian Futurist, I talk about them, and I think in Prometheism, in my book Prometheism, which launched the Prometheus movement, I expressed concern that these tectonic weapons would be used in the Third World War. That, as we move into the Third World War, you see Taiwan is being evacuated right now, by the way, folks. Taiwan is being evacuated right now.
Wow.
Americans are being evacuated from Taiwan right now. So as we move into the Third World War, don't be surprised if we suddenly have a lot of earthquakes and tsunamis attendant to them. Those are tectonic weapons that are going to be used by all sides, by us, by the Russians, etc. So these things exist. And so, yeah, that part of that, I watched the Greer testimony and I saw that that whistleblower basically described this tectonic weapon located in Antarctica that had the capacity to project earthquakes in different parts of the planet. And sadly, yes, those things exist. And I also think the slave trade thing that he testified to witnessing, this human trafficking, is real. And that's why, again, I repeat, to the people who are behind Grush, you all are going to find yourselves hanging from a noose and in front of firing squads, unless you get serious about the roadmap toward a new form of socio-political organization, at least in the Anglosphere. And the most fundamental level of that kind of socio-political reorganization is the ethos upon which you intend for our civilization to be based forward into the future. Okay? And I'm telling you right now, you will not be able to save yourselves unless you can define that aim or end meaningfully enough for at least some thinking and conscientious portion of the population who is going to basically, let's say, carve out some place for you in this new order, right? I mean, Otherwise, look, you're going to be prosecuted together with the people responsible for that slave trade. You won't be able to offer the classic SS defense. I was just following orders, and think that somehow you're going to escape the wrath of the masses, okay, by deflecting blame and responsibility to your superiors.
Very interesting. So the next super chat over here is actually not a super chat, but it is a donation from Payman Ferdosali, 1999. Thank you so much for the super chat without a comment. Really appreciate it. And just so you guys know, by the way, I want to do live events. I want to do live Break the Rules events in Manhattan. Everybody's welcome. I would love to have Jason, Neil, all the brilliant people come in. But in order to fund a lot of these live events, you need to have money, which is why the Super Chats and Patreon.com are going to be going towards the establishment of these live events. Here is the Patreon.com/Break the Rules link in the chat. Be sure to click that, and you're also going to get a lot of wonderful artistic things like, Jason, I know you're a big fan of art in general, surrealist art, and my father Alexander is an amazing artist who does these very beautiful magnets. So if you want to have something that was made with a lot of love, made out of high quality wood, for $20 patronage, these magnets could be yours. You could see, like, this isn't BS. This is like very beautiful, exquisite stuff that's made from the heart of a really good person. So there you go. And now we are going to go to the next super chat, which is...
You said before we go to the next super chat, just real quickly.
Sure.
Magnets, and it reminded me.
Okay. All right.
Magnets. So, okay, I know this is going to be hard to believe, but one of the reasons why I stuck my neck out as far as I did in Closer Encounters regarding time travel and this whole question of resets of the timeline and all this is because I was told by someone who had been to one of these facilities that Grush is talking about, one of these deep underground facilities belonging to one of the defense contractors. Let's just say Lockheed, okay? And he had been there, and they were training pilots to fly. I don't know whether it was the recovered vehicles or whether it was reverse engineered vehicles, ARVs, that they were building themselves. They were training them to fly these things, and the biggest problem they had was that this zero-point energy drive would cause spatiotemporal distortion. So it's not like they navigate space, they warp time. And so the pilots were experiencing extreme disorientation.
Wow.
And they were trying to figure out how is the geometry of spatial navigation correlated to time dilation? And they had developed this whole contraption which had dimension. It was like a gyroscope. And it had certain dimensions of space and certain dimensions of time. And they were interlinked with each other to show you like how much you move in time depending on navigation through space in a certain way. And they were trying to get these pilots to wrap their minds around this so they wouldn't be completely mind fucked in the cockpit of these vehicles. So point being, like, and I trust this individual, this salt of the earth person who told me that he had witnessed this. And anyway, I'm not going to say more than that. But point being, this dovetails with what Grush was saying himself about navigate hyperdimensional physics and the way in which these objects can traverse the timeline and not just navigate space.
And we have a super chat again from Uwu, who, by the way, Uwu is currently king or queen of the super chats, and you can see the name over there on the screen. So thank you, Uwu. Insiders mention the year 2027. Any idea as to why, Dr. Giorgiani?
Yeah, because it's when the Third World War ends. I mean, well, it's when the Third World War will wind up toward a conclusion. I think that between 2025 and 2028, we're going to have hell on earth. And things will take a big turn in 2027. I've said this before, I'll repeat it. I believe that France in 2027 is going to break with the Western Alliance and make a separate peace with Russia and by extension with China. And that France will be instrumental in 2027 in basically negotiating the formation of a new world order under the flag of, sadly, the United Nations. And so that's why I think 2027 is very significant.
a flag that I believe Stanley Kubrick was also alluding to in the documentary that I saw. But anyway, we have another one from Uwu, $5. What can we do at the moment of death to evade the Archons and avoid the memory wipe and forced reincarnation? Is there a way out of the soul trap?
Yeah, by cultivating your personal agency and maintaining your focus and knowing what it is you want moving forward from the moment of death. But let me use that question just as an opportunity to highlight another aspect of the horrendously unethical behavior of these entities, which Grush is alluding to when he says that when you look at it from a humanistic perspective, a lot of their behavior is negative, even malevolent. And that's this psychotronic manipulation. These Nordics have the capacity to reach into the post-mortem state, the afterlife, as it were, the transition between death and rebirth, and to manipulate your experiences in that state. And, you know, the really stellar case in this regard is that of Betty Andreasson. People should look into the Andreasson affair that was studied by Raymond Fowler. It's an excellent example of how these Nordics are the angels behind, you know, this experience of going into the light and, you know, meeting your dead relatives or meeting Jesus Christ and all this bullshit. It is psychotronic manipulation. And I mean, that makes the abductions look, you know, tame by comparison, right? I mean, it's one thing to abduct somebody's body during their lifetime. It's another thing to abduct somebody's soul and manipulate it after they're dead. I mean, that's horrendous. It's spiritual slavery that we've been subjected to. And so, again, you know, we have a very small window to organize some form of resistance and to salvage the ideals of the American Revolution, you know, to march under the banner of give me liberty or give me death.
Next super chat over here is from Quest on Channel, $2. When will we get official Promethean merch?
It depends on a number of factors. We'll have to see. Be patient.
I mean, there's some behind you, but that's yours. That's not really for.
Yeah, there's a few individuals who have proprietary merch thus far.
Like can I make a plug real quick?
Yes, sir.
I did start a second channel called Gnostic Informant TV, where I'm uploading compilations, shorts, basically highlights, stuff like that. And I put together the first full length documentary. It's a 7-hour video of the three interviews that Dr. Giorgiani and I did, and I put it together in a way where it is now in a feature length. I put it together. I chopped it up a little bit and made it so it's literally a masterpiece now. People are loving it. It's getting watched a lot. So
yeah, folks, please check out Neil's channel, Gnostic Informant. It is the best show having to do with theology and comparative religion. You know, it's been a real pleasure to be his guest.
Yeah. And Neil, you've gone through such a strange journey. You are not one of those people that was brought up into being like the serious academic scholar or something. And again, when I see things like that and the connection that the three of us were able to make, I definitely think that there are some very strange things going on here. Because, you know, this isn't supposed to be like that. You know, this isn't part of the program.
That's
yes.
They're at work.
Exactly. Yes. Exactamundo. All right. Next over here, we have Doc Fortune, $5. What does the average person need to do in the months and years to come?
Number one, cultivate your ethos. Okay? Build a spiritual backbone. And not based on some retarded ideology. Okay? Cultivate your conscience and your personal sense of meaning and purpose in life. Number one, okay? Cultivate your ethos. Number two, buy gold. Number three, buy guns. Number four, find a defensible piece of property.
Nice. Preferably one that has access to well water from beneath. That
would be nice. That would be preferable. You don't want to have to go loot other people's water.
Sam Fisher, $6.99 Canadian dollars. Jason, can you share any brief thoughts you might have on quantum computing? I don't know if brief and quantum computing go together, but I know. Give it a shot, I guess.
This is also at the core of the book that I'm writing right now, the project that I've begun. We live in a quantum computational cosmos, and consciousness plays an integral role in it, right? I mean, consciousness, is inextricable from the collapse of the wave function. I reject the many worlds interpretation, the Everett interpretation, because it's fundamentally contradictory to our having any free will or personal agency. And there's no evidence for it. And so I think that that's a ridiculously expensive theory. And I'm with the early people like Niels Bohr and Wolfgang Pauli and so forth, who believed that consciousness is really what collapses the wave function. So that if you conceive of us living in a quantum computational cosmos, a kind of holographic universe, consciousness is inextricable from the manifestation of phenomena. And that becomes very interesting when you then start to think about artificial intelligence and quantum artificial intelligence as part of a quantum computational system. Okay, so let me leave it at that for now, but give you a promissory note that it's at the heart of my current project.
Nice. And finally, we have over here, I don't know if finally I'm going to check over here to see if there's any more, but Lawrence, 20 Canadian dollars. I've long suspected that these so-called wildfires are being intentionally started and evidence is beginning to mount. Thoughts on how these orchestrated attacks fit into the larger context of your discussion?
Well, look, I mean, if you want to suppose that the fires have been somehow either deliberately orchestrated or augmented, then again, we're talking about like scalar weaponry, weather weapons, things like that. Okay, I mean, HARP can also do that. It can probably concentrate energy in a way that would catalyze or intensify a forest fire. And who would be responsible for something like that in Canada? Well, I mean, either the Russians or the Chinese. As a way to warn the United States of what the consequences would be through an intensification of either the war in Ukraine or opposition to China in the Taiwan Straits. And I can tell you, if that's the case, it was a very effective demonstration, because you should have seen New York during that couple of days. Yeah. I mean, it was something.
Oh, indeed.
Yeah. And if we had to live with a week of that in New York, it really was only bad for 1 or 2 days. If we had to live with a week of that in New York, that would be a catastrophe.
One other interesting thing of note there is that I was doing these comparisons when I was superimposing the pattern of lightning to the pattern of the heat signatures. I would not necessarily say that it matched up like people were saying, number one. Number two, I'd be very interested, if any of you guys are out there who are meteorologists, I'd be very interested to know what exactly are the historical highs for the amount of lightning strikes, even in the dry condition that they say was present within the Quebec area? What is the historical highest amount of fires that would be set in that kind of area? Maybe this is completely, kosher, but I want to see that data, and frankly, nobody seems curious to provide that kind of data. But anyway, be that as it may, I think that is the last of the Super Chats. I am just going to scroll up here to make sure, but once again, if you guys are enjoying this program, make sure you leave a like, make sure you subscribe, and click the bell. These ones, for some reason, didn't seem to come in, but I see them here. Chester, pair character jumping up and down and saying #1 fan. That may be an animation that was sent, so I appreciate it, Chester. No. Yeah, Chester the Pear Man. Another one here from DIY Craft Q. Pair character
listen, don't discount Chester the Pear Man. Chester is he's a very interesting character, and quite a force from behind the curtain and from in the shadows. Chester is the magical crow of our movement. So, Pearman, I'm in deep debt to you, my friend.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate it. Another one here from DIY Craft Q. Pair character lifting some weights, saying keep it up. There we go. That may also be either Chester or a friend of his. But yeah, these are all the super chats. So guys, this is it. Thank you so much for watching. A couple of plugs, by the way. First, Neil, Gnostic Informant, one of the greatest modern scholars of the ancient world of all time. That is not an exaggeration. When I turn his stuff on, I just listen to it on, while I'm driving, and I just I got to concentrate on the road. Otherwise, I might as well hit something because of how fascinating this dude is. So
I'm more of a wanderer for truth than a scholar, but it's okay. You can call me that.
So where can people find you?
Gnostic Informant. Type it in at youtube.com/Gnostic Informant. But I also want to make clear I have another channel that's out now, Gnostic Informant TV. That's growing really fast. In fact, that documentary I was just mentioning, 7-hour-long documentary, something to put on before you go to sleep to watch and doze off to. That already has 20,000 views in 2 days.
Unbelievable, man.
People are loving that conversation we had. So they're definitely have to set up some more of those in the future. Atlantis.
Yeah, they are going to McLovin that so much. Anyway, Jason Rizza-Giorgiani, Dr. Jason Rizza-Giorgiani, PhD. Where could people find you? What is the easiest place, other than in the description, where there is a link, by the way, to your book? But where else could people find you?
I would go to my YouTube channel. What I update most often is probably my YouTube channel, and I'm on social media, Twitter. Who knows? Forget Facebook. Don't go to Facebook. Twitter, Instagram, but yeah, my YouTube channel. Is there a link in the description to my YouTube channel?
There is, absolutely, yeah. Just click Prometheism
channel.
Yes. And finally, guys, be sure to check me out at LevPo on Twitter, and also I have a Substack, levpo.substack.com. Be sure to check that out. I just had a new article that I wrote today. I don't know if you guys will agree with it, disagree with it, but it would definitely take a lot of research into getting the nitty-gritty of it. So be sure, it's about Tucker Carlson. Be sure to check that out. And also patreon.com/breaktherules. Once again, be sure to go there. And for all of you crazy people who are on Discord, there is a Break the Rules Discord, and the link I'm sending right here, right now. This is the Discord link. It is in the chat. So be sure to go there, join the community, and I don't know, Instagram, instagram.com/Lev Polyakov. Go there and follow me on Instagram. And since you're probably going to be real people, I'll know which one of you saw this, with your Instagram profile following me all of a sudden. So guys, thank you so much for watching. I am such a big fan of having you guys on. And be sure to check out this Thursday, 3 p.m. Eastern, when we are having Ben Avery, formerly of The Tim Dillon Show, and now of Lemon Party, together with Uber Boyo. We are going to be talking about Carl Jung, and I really want to find out about that whole I-Ching thing that you were talking about.
The noosphere, the astral plane, the right hemisphere, the left hemisphere. I try to stay really, really grounded in the science the best I can. I know it's a bit boyo science, but I stay grounded in that the best I can, because it's something I can sort of rely on. So I'm going to give you 3 different possibilities, if you will, about what I'm thinking. Now, one of them I've already kind of cracked into, about the idea of the dreams speaking to the left hemisphere, or the right hemisphere speaking to the left hemisphere through dreams. You can look up the studies that talk about this. Now, the reason why this stuff starts to get kind of weird is because, if you look up Operation Stargate by the CIA, what the CIA did is they were trying to figure out, is there anything to all these fucking wanking mystics? Like, what the hell is going on here with this stuff? And so they actually sat people down and they started to put on CG scans to their heads and get them to meditate, get high-level meditators in, get Nepalese meditators, get weird New Age people in. And they discovered that these people were actually doing things like, well, all right, as much as we can trust what was coming out from some type of declassified study about meditation and astral projection and all that, they discovered that they could actually train people to astrally project. So they claim. And what they noticed is that what would happen is that they get this thing called hemisyncs, this experience of the two hemispheres within the brain when you create this deep experience of relaxation through Kundalini yoga, is literally what they said. You would create this synchronization between the two hemispheres, which would then create a sort of unified consciousness that is different than normal, which would allow people to remote view stuff. So they claim. I don't know what it is. You can literally go look up the documents if you want. It's extremely interesting. There's plenty of science underneath this as well. If you've ever heard about brain waves, you know about, for example, you've got the low brain waves that chill you out. Gamma brain waves, they're very, very famous for being the highest ones we get. When you stand there and you put together an idea, you have a eureka moment. You're like, oh, eureka, that type of feeling in your head or feeling in your mind. That's a flash of gamma waves. That's usually when you get them. And what happens is everything comes together. And of course, actually what happens during that moment is the synchronization of the brain. Everything flashes together in this regard. A high level Nepalese meditator who is close to, shall we say, nirvana, who's done 20 years of work, they usually have this constant all the time ping of a gamma wave going on. So these guys have trained themselves to switch on this synchronization. And of course, they see that the brain transmits and speaks across the hemispheres when you get these type of gamma waves in. So there's a possibility that yes, through something like meditation, you switch the brains together and get them to work together. And this is taking possibly the dreaming mind and the normal left hemisphere Broca's-era ego and getting them to talk to each other. Now, the reason why I keep on, I might even be proposing this, and I'm only saying these foundations because I don't know how many people aren't familiar with my videos and whatnot. For example, when you cut, so when someone has epilepsy, they usually cut the middle between the two brains. And this is where they actually started to study this. And what they found is that you can actually show the person words, and the left hemisphere will see the words on one side, but it won't see the words on the other side. But you can get then the left hand to draw what it saw, and it will draw the word on the side that the left hemisphere didn't see it. So the conscious mind can see one side of it, which seems like it's on the left hemisphere, but the right hemisphere can sit there and see something and use the left hand, because they're cross-wired, to draw what it sees. But when you ask the person what did they see, they won't tell you what they see. So it almost looks like consciousness is separate and the right hemisphere is like close
so like they're thinking and they're getting visions as if somebody else is implanting it into their heads of what to write at that point. When it comes to Kundalini, I'm glad you mentioned it, because that's the last thing that I did not mention. I also have the Kundalini in the back, and I've had for several years. So when it comes to doing like the Wim Hof method, various breathing techniques, what ended up happening is like you breathe in slowly in and out, and all of a sudden you got this weird liquid snake-like energy that's going up and down through your back, doing whirls, and I don't know exactly what the end point of this is going to be. People who have described having certain profound experiences, like my friend John Chavez, who did the documentary over here in chat. You could see DMT Quest, retweeted by Joe Rogan, by the way, and Dennis McKenna, and we had Dennis on our show. But anyway, he talks about how you're absolutely right, like these various brain waves are able to be manifested when people either take DMT, or when people meditate, or when people also like meditate in combination with these breathing techniques. So what I don't know, though, is what exactly happens towards the end. He described his experience, but he was also under DMT, I believe, at the time, or mushrooms, where his consciousness felt like it went up through the spine and went all the way out of his brain and just went several feet up in the air. And a lot of monks describe this sensation of samadhi, as they call it, where you, as the perceiver, and whatever it is that you're perceiving combines together into one whole. So at that point, you do feel like, I am the oneness of the universe, but it doesn't last. And the interesting thing for me is, like, sure, we could say eventually we are all one man and all that, but as far as how these things can actually change us as far as who we are, like a lot of the romanticism, I think, comes from this idea of there being these Hyperboreans or these Atlanteans or these various people who were able to. Yeah, no, we're definitely getting into it.
History. Speaking of the CIA,
19 years before Hitler ever set foot in the government. There it is, people. 6 million Jews. The New York Times, October the 18th, 1918, and the article is called $1 billion Fund to Rebuild Jewry. There it is. 6 million souls will need help to resume normal life when war is ended. The New York Times, September the 8th, 1919, and the article is called Ukrainian Jews Aim to Stop Pogroms. Mass meeting here that 127,000 Jews have been killed and 6 million are in peril. In the New York Times, November the 12th, 1919, and have reduced to tragically unbelievable poverty, starvation and disease. About 6 million souls, or half the Jewish population of the earth. February 23rd, 1920.
Be that the cryptocurrency that was started as a joke to make fun of cryptocurrencies ends up being the leading cryptocurrency.
Выстрел!
Хотелось бы передать привет своим родным, близким, товарищам, которые служат на других концах фронта.
New Lucasade Sport Zero Sugar. Here to hydrate.
The Book of Mormon is the killer whale of comedy, which exempts nobody. Tickets on sale now.
According to that precedent. End of the story. Now, Tom Fitton is getting all kinds of shit for what they think is bad legal advice from somebody who's not a lawyer. Do you see it that way? Do you see that the sock drawer case is bad legal advice? Well, I think the bad legal advice was that because he had the right to the documents, that he should resist giving them back. I think it's the resisting giving back that is the real problem. So I saw some, I looked at some MSNBC crap today to see what they were saying about the sock drawer defense. Do you know what they say about the sock drawer defense? Which to me looks, in my non-lawyer brain, looks airtight. To me, that looks like the beginning and the end of the whole conversation. But I'm not a lawyer, right? And as Alan Dershowitz points out, the Espionage Act has to be read in coordination with the Presidential Records Act. In other words, you can't look at either of them individually. You have to look at them as a entangled pair. Now, does your legal experience allow you to look at those things as a tangled pair? Can you do that? That's a little bit outside of my, my sweet spot. I mean, I can guess what something will happen with one simple situation. Sock drawer, yes, no. I mean, I feel like I can take a guess on that. Maybe a wrong guess, but I can take a guess. But I can't even take a guess on an entangled, two-part, detailed, historical precedence. I mean, I don't know how you'd untangle all that stuff. But here's what the Democrats say about the sock drawer defense. Let's talk about something else. Would you like to see that impression again? All right, it goes like this. What do you think about the Clinton sock drawer defense? Talk about something else. How about the obstruction? It's the obstruction. No, we're not even going to talk about the sock drawer. Sock drawer? What's this got to do with a sock drawer? There's no socks in the story. And then they act all weird like it wasn't a thing. But apparently even Jonathan Turley, a famously balanced and wise attorney, once he saw the indictment, he said, whoa, there's more jeopardy here than I thought. Do you know what the jeopardy is that Turley saw that maybe he didn't see in the early reporting? The photographs of the mishandling of the boxes. So he thought, that, for example, the pictures of the boxes in a stage area and in a bathroom was just really damning. All right, what do we know about the boxes? Let's talk about what we know about the boxes. So we know that there was a photo of boxes in a bathroom, right? How many of the confidential documents were in those specific boxes in the bathroom? How many? Well, that's clearly in the indictment, right? Well, that's not being reported every day because that's such a big part of the story. The big part of the story is all those boxes. We've got a picture of boxes. So what's in them? What's in the fucking boxes? If you have not told us that those specific boxes have secrets in them, that's not part of the story. If it turns out that those boxes do have things that are classified, but if you and I saw them, we would laugh because they're not important, that's a big part of the story. Is there anybody who told you, yes, there were boxes in the bathroom, and there was a document in there, but it's sort of dated and old and doesn't matter, and the public already knew it anyway? Did you hear that? I mean, I don't know what's in the boxes, but I know that a photograph of fucking boxes doesn't put you in jail. You better do better than that. We know that most of the boxes were personal items. We've been sold on the idea that every one of those fucking boxes has secrets in it. The entire amount of secrets, who was it on Newsmax who did this? Give me the name of the host on Newsmax who showed the number of documents. I think there were 600 pages or something. Greg Kelly. So Greg Kelly did the visual persuasion very well, by the way. So he showed you one box, and then he showed what it would look like to have 600 pages of documents in one box. It was this tall, right? This tall in one box would be the total contents of all. Now, if you assume that some of these secrets were spread across different boxes because nobody really was paying attention, right? There wasn't any order to it. They were just in different boxes. Then how easily could Trump have looked through all those boxes to give them back the stuff that they wanted versus the stuff that he knew was his private stuff? I don't see any scenario where anybody could get Trump to sit down and look through his own boxes. There were just too many of them. You know, when does Trump sit there and say, all right, that document, how many more boxes? 500. All right, this one, I guess I keep this one. What's the next one? There's no way he actually looked through the boxes. And I don't think that anybody has told us which boxes had what, and they certainly haven't told us how secret it was. Every part of this is sketchy as hell. You don't think there was any part of the conversation where somebody said, these boxes, maybe they need to be locked up, but these other boxes, you could just put them in that bathroom because there's nothing in them important? I feel like somebody probably at least asked the question, do these boxes have any secrets in them, right? Because I think didn't they treat some of the boxes differently? Some of them were treated like they needed to be stored somewhere, right? But maybe the storage came after the DOJ got involved. So here's what I saw. I saw, at least according to the Clinton-Sack precedent, that President Trump had a legal access to everything he took with him by the process of taking it with him, right? The process of removing them turned it personal, according to precedent, and therefore that's not the legal jeopardy. The legal jeopardy, and Turley suggests this as well, is how he handled things after the records were asked back. Now let me put this in context. The thing that Trump did, as far as I can tell, with my limited legal knowledge, looked legal to me because of the precedent. The part that he is in trouble for is obstructing the injustice of them asking for things that were legally his. Now, is it justice to ask you to give somebody to say, give me your stuff that is legally yours? Is that justice? Or sounds like injustice to me. Seems like the very definition of an injustice is taking somebody's private property from them. So Trump is literally at risk of going to jail for obstructing injustice. Am I wrong? The thing he obstructed was not justice, because he believed he owned those documents, and I would say that he's probably right.
Hello, Jerome.
But the obstructing was obstructing not justice, but injustice. They were trying to take his stuff, according to him. So he could actually go to jail for obstructing injustice. And we're just going to watch that happen? All right, I'm going to say it again. Trump's not going to jail. Not over anything that we've heard about so far. I mean, if there's something we don't know about, that's different. But he's not going to jail. And when I say that, I don't mean that as a prediction. You understand that, right? That's not a prediction. It's also a prediction. But I'm just telling you, the country's not going to let him go to jail for this. It's just not going to. So if there's anybody on the Democrat side who thinks they can get away with this, putting him in jail for obstructing injustice, you've got a surprise coming. I don't know what that surprise will look like, but I wouldn't want to be living in this country when it happens. PJ says, Scott is quite the spin doctor. You know what people say when I'm right? Stop spinning. You're spinning. Do you know what people say when I'm wrong? Oh, here's why you're wrong, and let me show you the link that proves you're wrong. But what do they say when I'm right about everything? That I'm a troll? Is that right, PJ? So please continue saying those things you're saying. They feel good. All right. Twitter account Kanakoa the Great, who I often recommend you should be following, is one of many people talking about there's some document that came out about the vaccinations. I think was it a Pfizer document? And the alleged story, and my take on this is I don't believe the story. All right. So there's something wrong with the story, but I don't know what it is. But I'm not believing this story at all. That there's some document that shows Pfizer shot was like massively dangerous across all of your organs, and everything from your eyesight to your guts would fall out, and every part of your body would be damaged, and there were like over 1 million cases of this, and they knew it before they put them out, and the FDA continues to criminally label these safe, says Kaneko the Great, etc. Now, because I know at least 25% of you are not going to understand what I say next, I'm going to try to be as clear as possible. 75% of you will get it right away. 25% of you are going to go, whoa, whoa, whoa. All right, you ready? 25% of you, get ready to flip out. See if you can understand this nuance. Independent from the question of whether the vaccinations are safe or unsafe, in other words, that's not my topic. I'm not going to tell you that the vaccinations are safe or unsafe. That's not my topic. So when you comment on that, you'll be on the wrong topic because you're going to comment on that. Go ahead. Scott says the vaccinations are safe. Go ahead. 25% of the idiots, you just need to get it out of your fucking system. Just get it out of your system. By the way, I was up all last night with food poisoning, so I'm not in a good mood. I'm not in a good mood at all. So all you fucking idiots who want to say that what I say next is supporting the vaccinations, just get it out of your fucking system. Just do it now, will you? All right. Here's what I'm going to say. I don't believe the study because it's too on the nose. Too on the nose. Doesn't mean it's wrong. Here's the part the 25% won't understand. They're getting confused already. That I don't know what is true or not true about vaccines. It's just that this information is just way too on the nose. That's all. There's something wrong. There's either some context missing, something. Now, again, there it is. Claude Adams debunked again. So all the 25% over there who fell for the 4chan hoax about my pandemic opinions believe that I was pro-vaccination. Do you want to admit it? Is there anybody here who wants to admit they fell for the 4chan hoax about my opinions? Go ahead, admit it. I want to see you admit that you actually believe the 4chan hoax. Go ahead. All right. So, somebody asked me what I ate. This actually is funny because I did it to myself. So I've been eating super, super basic and clean. You know, just like not even like much in the way of sauces or anything. I'm not even using soy sauce. Like I'm just taking it down to a basic, butter on a piece of broccoli and a piece of salmon sort of thing. And yesterday I decided, things were going well. And I wanted to experiment by doing a DoorDash of a local restaurant. And so I picked my favorite local restaurant. Got a meal that was amazing, like really just amazing. Because if you don't eat good food for an extended period, and then you put something delicious in your mouth, your head explodes. I don't know if you've ever had that experience. Like if you had dental problems and you couldn't eat for a few days, then the first thing you put in your mouth is like, oh my God, what is this? So I ordered some food, ate it up, and it was all, highly seasoned, spicy, and it just ripped my guts out. So it was a long night. Anyway, that's enough about that. Rasmussen asked this question, and what was the result? That's right, 25%. Do you need to hear the question? You already know the result because it's always 25%, or roughly. All right, here's the question. So the question was set up for this from Rasmussen. Vivek Ramaswamy said on Twitter, quote, "This is an affront to every citizen. We cannot devolve into a banana republic where the party in power uses police force to arrest its political opponents." it's hypocritical for the DOJ to selectively prosecute Trump, but not Biden. So 58% agreed with that. 50% of likely voters agreed with that. And how many people do you think strongly disagreed with the idea we should not be arresting political opponents? Yeah, 25%. It's exactly what you guessed before you even saw the question. That's how smart the viewers of this live stream are. They know answers before the questions. Every time. All right. Well, California wants to make it illegal for a parent to refuse their kid's gender choice. Now, how many parents do you think agree with that? How many voters? How many voters in California do you think agree that a parent should not have the right to suppress their child's idea that they're a different gender? Yeah, 28% think it's abusive. 28% think it's abusive for parents to encourage their kids to stay with the gender identification with which they were born. 28%. All right. Which means that Californians overwhelmingly think the parents should be in control of that decision, and yet the legislation is moving forward. Just think about that. An overwhelming majority don't want this to happen in California, and it looks like they're going to do it. Going to do it anyway. So there's your government working for you. Now, I suppose the counter-argument for it would look like this. The counter-argument would be there is one situation in which the majority should be ignored. What would that be? And I'm not talking about national defense. I'm talking about a state. But within a state, there is one situation in which the will of the people should be completely ignored, even if everybody has the same information. I'm not talking about lack of information. What would it be? The will of the people should be ignored when? Exactly. Minority rights are involved. That is the one time that you want your leaders to overrule the majority. Because I'm not sure what majority of people would have ever voted for a lot of things which have made the country better in terms of minority rights. So I do think minority rights is the one time where I'll say, all right, maybe the majority isn't the best way to go on this one. But this particular minority that we're talking about is minors. Do you treat the minority of people under 18 the same? I mean, we have a pretty large precedent of not treating children as adults. I feel like we could stick to that.
I've been arrested under draconian
so I don't think
laws
this is so much that the minority.
I
don't think this falls into the
our democratic
protecting.
right to protest. I don't want to be doing this, but I can't be. Today, I've been arrested under draconian laws that the government have put in place to try and quash our democratic right to protest. I don't want to be doing this, but I can't be a bystander and I can't do nothing while we hurtle towards climate destruction.
Arrested Donald Trump this afternoon. They had him arraigned and fingerprinted in a Miami courthouse like the accused felon he now technically is. These were the first steps in a process that is designed to put Donald Trump behind bars for the rest of his life. Cable news carried every moment of it live. It's unprecedented, they told us, with what looked like shock. But they weren't shocked. They knew this was coming. Everyone who's paid attention knew it was. What just happened was always going to happen. It's been inevitable since February 16th, 2016. That's the day Donald Trump made a blood enemy of the largest and most powerful organization in human history, which would be the federal government. Despite what you may remember, it wasn't anything that Trump had said about immigration or trade with China or rapists from Mexico. Those are the stories that dominated the headlines that year. Trump's a racist, they screamed. Stop him! But inside Washington, that was just noise. None of it really rated. Identity politics doesn't mean much to permanent Washington. What matters, then and now, is foreign policy. The invasions and occupations and proxy wars. The decisions that determine which global populations will thrive and which will die. The policies that come with trillion-dollar price tags. The ones that, over time, have made the counties around D.C. the richest suburbs in the world. In Washington, that's what actually matters. And it's obvious when you look carefully. When there's a debate about anything else, for example, the debt ceiling, both sides take their assigned positions and they start yelling. But when Congress decides to start a war, no matter how foolish or counterproductive or obviously disconnected from America's core interests that war may be, when that happens, the leaders of both parties automatically jump behind it like circus clowns. And then they stay there, sometimes for decades. They defend that war relentlessly against all evidence until somebody finally rings the all-clear bell and they can begin to admit that actually, maybe it wasn't such a great idea. We meant well, but it just didn't work out. The good news is we've learned a lot of important lessons. In the end, they usually do say something like that, but only after emotions have cooled and the damning details have begun to fade from collective memory. It's an apology that's not actually an apology, much less repentance, and it's years too late to matter in any case. But until then, that's all you're getting. Until then, no dissent is allowed. That's the first rule of Washington. But somehow, Trump didn't bother to follow it. He is from out of town, so maybe he didn't know it was a rule, or maybe he just didn't care. Either way, 7.5 years later, we can point to the precise moment that permanent Washington decided to send Donald Trump to prison. Here it is. It's from the Republican candidates debate in Greenville, South Carolina.
We should have never been in Iraq. We have destabilized the Middle East. They lied.
Okay.
They said there were weapons of mass destruction. There were none, and they knew there were none. There were no weapons of mass destruction.
All right.
We should never have been in Iraq, Trump said. We destabilized the Middle East. Now, by the time Trump said that, a lot of Republican primary voters were starting to reach the same conclusion. How could they not? But it was the next line that doomed Trump to today's arrest. They lied, he said. There were no weapons of mass destruction, and they knew there were none. Now, when he said that, a few in the crowd booed. Most just sat there in silence, stunned. Can he say that? Well, he said it anyway. And by saying that, he sealed his fate. That was the one thing you were not allowed to say, because it implicated too many people on both sides, which on this topic is really just one side. Hillary Clinton was guilty of it, but so was Paul Ryan. All of them were guilty. They all knew, they all lied. And to a person, they hated Donald Trump for exposing them. After that, it was pretty clear that even if he did get elected president, Trump was going to have a very hard time controlling the federal government he was supposed to be in charge of. Most of permanent Washington decided that thwarting Trump was the single most important mission in their lives. Everything depended on it. Many of them said so publicly. But others didn't say so publicly. In fact, the stealthier ones took another path. They ran toward Trump, not away from him. They sucked up to him. They ingratiated themselves with the man they intuitively understood was susceptible to flattery, which Trump is. And they did this in order to subvert his new administration from the inside. There were a number of these, and you could spot them immediately. They were flatterers. Invariably, the ones who flattered Trump the most hated him the most and disagreed the most strongly with his views. You saw them in the hallways of the White House and at press conferences. They were there slobbering over their boss with elaborate self-abasement, as if they were addressing a monarch or a god. It was a scene from the Ottoman court. It was filthy and decadent, and it was false. Mike Pence, Nikki Haley, Mike Pompeo, Lindsey Graham in the Congress. They all called Trump a visionary genius up until the moment he lost power. And then they unsheathed their real agenda, as always the neocon war agenda, and they piled on with maximum force. Here's Mike Pompeo, for example, on Fox News this morning.
President Trump had classified documents where he shouldn't have had them, and then when given the opportunity to return them, he chose not to do that for whatever reason. When somebody identifies that, you got to turn them in. And so that's inconsistent with protecting America's soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines. And if the allegations are true, some of these We're pretty serious.
The important bill called the Crown Act, which according to the celebratory television, all of them believe that Ukraine, its borders, its future, its infrastructure are all more important than the town that you live in. They sincerely think that, and it's obvious. Everyone in power thinks that, except for Donald Trump. Whatever else you say about him, Trump is the one guy with an
I'm not taking your match away. If Kino should
plans to build a railroad from the Pacific all the way across the Indian Ocean. We have plans to build in Angola, one of the largest solar plants in the world. I can go on, but I'm not. I'm going off script. I'm going to get in trouble.
Inflate, and so you can stick with things that way. So what we have is a lack of alternatives. And I think the lack of alternatives supports the the stock market, but I wouldn't buy anything with a high multiple. I mean, just in general, I wouldn't buy anything with a high multiple. Although I have, but in special cases. What about real estate? Well, there's supposed to be a commercial real estate collapse that's coming, which should affect the banks. But for some reason, we talked about it a lot, and then we stopped talking about it. I don't know why. Because if it's as big a problem as it looks, we should be only talking about it. Like there wouldn't be any other problem. It's the biggest of all big problems if it takes out the banks. But I just wonder if we know anything about anything anymore in terms of economics. The experts have done such a bad job of predicting that it feels like predicting is just nonsense now. You know, how many of you predicted, besides me, now by the way, can I get a fact check on this? I believe I was one of the first, there had to be others, but I think I was one of the first people to say in public that the economy would not go into a deep recession. And that if there was one at all, it would be a glancing recession and probably not one at all, right? Now, was I exactly right? So far. I would say I had the most accurate, there may have been other people who said the same thing, but I didn't hear them. Yeah, but well before we knew what would happen, I said minor recession or none at all. That's what we got. That's exactly what we got. I of course, like everybody said, there would be inflation, but I was a little less certain that we knew that would end us. I didn't think it would necessarily take us out. I thought we'd figure out some way to work through it. So far we're working through the inflation, I would say. You know, it is dropping slowly, but if it's dropping at all, you're probably going to be fine. Remember I told you that jobs were the one thing to watch. Watch the jobs. If you get the jobs right, usually everything else can, you know, work its way out and adjust. But lack of jobs is just a killer. That one you don't get over too easily. And our jobs stayed good, surprisingly good. And that's probably why we avoided a recession. So I would look at my predictions. So here's what I think about the stock market. I think the stock market will just be an average good stock market because things are returning from, you know, pandemic levels. We're working through the inflation. Jobs are staying good. We're repatriating some stuff from China, but you know that's not the biggest thing that's happening. If you were to look at what's happening, there's a whole lot of good stuff happening. Yeah, a whole lot of good stuff happening. So I would expect that the stock market is a reasonably good place to have money if you're going to keep it there for 5 years or more. But that's always the case. If economists could predict anything, they'd be billionaires. And some are. Some are. That's how Soros made his money, by predicting what would happen next. That's how Warren Buffett made his billions, by knowing what would happen. Yeah. Did that sound like I was supporting Soros? It's a weird day today. I don't know what that's all about. All right. Video, Biden says he will build railroad across the Indian Ocean. What? Biden says he wants to build a railroad across the Indian Ocean? That can't be real. Is that real? That doesn't sound real. Did you watch the jobs? So there was some jobs news today, right? The jobs underperformed. Is that right? There was some job news today. But it didn't look like it was such a big change from prediction that it matters. From the Pacific Ocean to the Indian Ocean. What? Is he trying to, he misspoke, okay. Yeah, short-term T-bills, 5%. Sure. I mean, if you want your money right away. But for your investing money, I'm not sure you want it there. Yeah, my main investments are S&P 500 and the QQQ, NASDAQ. It's hard to get a job in app support now because of AI. All right. Give up, dude. He won't go back. Claims to be open to feedback. There's probably just some comments that I didn't see go by. Of course I'm open to feedback. What is it you're trying to tell me that I missed? What's your you meant to say? Never answered your question. All right, well, I don't see what it is you were complaining about. All right. Daniel Penny, how many of you think Daniel Penny should have been indicted? Is there anybody here who thinks he should have been indicted? Right. None of you think this is anything but a racial outcome, right? It's just racism. That's what it looks to me like, just racism. Which I can say out loud, but some of you cannot. I tell you, this free speech thing is working out great for me. I'm liking it a lot. So I understand the Dilbert Reborn comic didn't publish this morning on Locals, but I will fix that as well as on Twitter. So if you want to see the new Dilbert comic that is far spicier than anything you've seen before, because it's behind a paywall, you can see it on Twitter if you subscribe to me, and you can see it on the Locals platform, scottadams.locals.com. All right. With inflation, Daniel Penny should be at least a nickel. All right. I approve of that dad joke. By now, Daniel Penny is worth at least a nickel. And 50 cents is worth 10 cents. How about going live on Twitter? I don't even know how you do that. No, I don't think Turley has turned. He just saw a bunch of photographs of boxes that were alarming. And spaces. What would I do on spaces? Just more of this? Just once, don't you want to see the family of the deceased say, yeah, I have to admit he had it coming? Like, just once, don't you want to see that? Like, yeah, it's a tragedy, but honestly, the way he was acting, totally understand. I guess that's hard to do if it's your own family. All right, YouTube, I'm going to say bye for now. I'm going to see you tomorrow. Best live stream you've seen this morning. No doubt about it.
Trad wife poster girl Lauren Southern is getting a divorce. She posted a video that should have been called, "I'm back and I was wrong about marriage. It's a mess." In short, she married a part Asian Australian who worked for the equivalent of the Aussie FBI, their secret intelligence. Now, right there, bad idea. You chose the wrong guy, especially if you're a supposed political dissident. This could never work. Bad choice. Now, there's always two sides to a divorce, but basically, although he was trad Catholic, it turns out he wasn't who she thought he was, and her most traumatic experience has been being a housewife. She ended up renting a cabin at a trailer park with her son in Canada and found real community with the plebes who didn't know her as Lauren Southern. A little humble bragging. While telling her relationship journey, she makes side commentary lecturing people on the right for their views on marriage and relationships. She claims she knows people who are hiding their struggling marriages and pretending for their viewers, posting the best picture moments. So therefore, everyone on the right is living a lie. Well, speak for yourself. It's telling of who she's hanging out with. Lauren spent a lot of time backtracking things she once said years back about marriage and relationships, because now she's getting divorced. One bad experience, and here's why the right is wrong about marriage. Here's the straight up truth. Claiming she helped create a movement that has no acceptance or understanding of the human condition, lecturing the right on their values when it comes to marriage. No, girl, you chose the wrong guy. It doesn't have anything to do with anyone else, their values, or political ideology. Don't make it into something it isn't. In fact, she said she was ready to
Day 476. Today there is a lot of good news from the south. Ukrainian forces continue successfully advancing in all main directions. Yesterday I told you that Levadne may very soon become the main axis of advance. And today Russian sources confirmed that after demining the field and conducting small reconnaissance in force operations, Ukrainians launched a much bigger attack. Russian sources reported that Ukrainians are advancing not only eastward but also southward, and that today Ukrainian assault units established control over multiple Russian positions in the tree lines. Ukrainian forces are also ramping up the intensity of their attacks in the direction of Rivnopil. Today Russian sources reported that Ukrainians assaulted the settlement with up to 5 tanks and 5 armored fighting vehicles. The goal of this combination of attacks remains to even out the front line and set the conditions for a broader line of advancement. Ukrainian fighters continue releasing footage showing their newly captured positions and the process of sorting the captured equipment, cleaning the trenches, and preparing the trenches for defending against potential Russian counterattacks. Other Ukrainian assault units demonstrated their trophies captured in the aftermath of heavy fights. They said that judging by the quality of the equipment, they were fighting against extremely well-prepared Russian forces, not some under-equipped mobilized soldiers that did not know how to effectively use complex weapons, which makes the victory even more meaningful. Ukrainians also confirmed that they captured multiple pieces of heavy equipment, such as tanks and armored fighting vehicles. When it comes to the Russian counterattack, as expected, Russian forces failed to recapture Makarivka due to the weak control over the tactical heights around this settlement. Russian sources reported that they relocated their forces from the Orikhi front to increase the scale and potency of their counterattack and opened another direction, namely Orozhaine. Some sources claim that the village is now in the gray zone and the ongoing clashes do not cease because Ukrainians stubbornly